Hey, welcome, everybody, to a very special event today. We have Emperor Atheist versus the Catholic Fusionist. On the topic, is biblical slavery compatible with omnibenevolence? This is going to be a pretty in-depth topic. Hopefully, we all learn something from this. I think, obviously, the Catholic Fusionist is going to try to defend the theistic position that biblical slavery is compatible with omnibenevolence, and Emperor Atheist, who is an atheist, is going to take the negative on this. If you want to join us, we are going to open this up in about an hour or so for questions, and you can come in and ask them. But it's going to start off about 10 minutes each. Each individual here is going to give a little bit of an introduction, their argument, they'll do a rebuttal, and then there's going to have a free-form back and forth, and then we'll open up to people to come in and join us. So who do you guys want to start first? Did you want to go first? By the way, the Catholic Fusionist I will be referring to as CF. Hi, CF.
Hi.
Okay. So do you want to go first, and then Atheist can do his?
I'll go. Yeah, I'll go first by
because you're taking the affirmative. Awesome.
Yeah, because I'm taking the affirmative. And by the way, for all my friends, you guys know me as Max, but please bear with the name change.
Max who?
Hangs out or Max Besses. All right. In any case, just tell me when to start, and I'll begin.
You're good to go. Begin.
Okay. All right, well, I'll just begin with a simple thank you. Thank you, Steve, for hosting. And Emperor Atheist, thank you for taking the role of the opposition. It's no fun when you're just preaching to the choir, so all thanks. And I'd actually like to thank a few of my friends for helping me set up my arguments. First, I'd like to thank my friend Slim Jim. And I'd also like to thank my friend Frank for letting me bounce some ideas off them. And thank you to my friend Shadow Heathens for giving me some Jewish sources and how they would understand the purpose of slavery within the context of the Old Testament. But let's begin by making a distinction between biblical slavery and human slavery. In all circumstances, human slavery is absolutely wrong because you cannot properly take what is not yours or what is not given unto you. Since no human life is his to give or hers to give, nor can any man take what does not belong to him in the first place, it is always theft. But who does human life belong to, if not our own? Well, according to 1 Corinthians 10:26, for the earth is the Lord's and all that it contains. And what does it say about what God gives us? Well, it says in Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our own image, after our own likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. The earth is God's, and we only have a right to use it for reasons of property because he allows us to have dominion over it. But he does not extend this dominion concerning other human beings. So in light of that, we are not ours to give, nor are we ours to take from one another. But rather, in the state of nature, we all belong, or we are all supposed to use our own bodies in service of God, as he is the proper owner of each and every one of us. Whether you agree with this or not is not relevant. What only counts is how it relates to the Christian worldview encapsulated in itself. Biblical slavery is a different matter, though. In the context of the Old Covenant, God is free to permit one man to own another at his will, since his creation is his to give domain over as he sees fit. However, note that this does not extend to other forms of slavery. Greek slavery, Southern slavery, Mesopotamian slavery, South American slavery, etc. Since none of these are built on a covenant with God, at least not demonstrably so, the Christian is at liberty to regard each and every one of these institutions as a great evil and thus move to abolish them. But why would a loving God or a good God allow such an institution in the first place? Well, first let's define what it means to be all-loving. Love, in the sense of the Greek word agape, is willing the good for the other as other. That is to say, God wills the good for all people, given who they are and what they need, not necessarily as a means of affection or feeling like we have, like an erotic love, or out of a passion, but rather it is just one's duty to will what's good for another person, and no higher being is better than God himself. God is that which none greater can exist, and thus the best thing God can give is himself, be it through any kind of institution or covenant that he sees fit, though that is up to his wisdom. Now, how is it that slavery interferes with God-loving people in such a way? First, let's begin with justifying why the institution of slavery would be necessary. In the Jewish context, there are two kinds of slaves: the Eved Canaan, the non-Jewish slaves, and the Eved Ivri, Jewish slaves. Jewish slaves were to be treated as hired help. It says in Leviticus 25:39-40, if a countryman of yours becomes so poor with regards to you that he sells himself to you, you shall not subject him to a slave service. He shall be with you as a hired man, as if he were a sojourner. He shall serve with you until the end of the year of Jubilee. Although legally a Jewish slave is a slave on paper, in practice that cannot be the case. No one treats hired help as a slave or as property. What is different in the eyes of the law, that is on paper, is different from what is done in practice. In Leviticus 25:53, we are told that slaves are not to be ruled with rigor, let alone oppression. As a slave hired year by year shall he be with him. He shall not be ruled with rigor over him in his own sight. Jewish slaves, per Deuteronomy 15:12, were required to be released every 7 years. If a member of your community, whether a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and works for you 6 years, in the 7th year, you shall set that person free. The purpose of this institution was for 3 reasons. 1, it provided a way for slaves to escape debt, as the previous passages alluded to. But 2, it provided a way for women to pay off their dowry when marrying into a richer family, if you were a daughter. And we can see men doing this on parallel. In fact, back in Genesis 29:15-30, Jacob, before the covenant was instituted, but still in terms of the common practice of Jacob's day, served himself to Laban for 14 years for 2 of his daughters. The Jewish Encyclopedia says, if the father was unable to pay the sum he promised as a dowry to his daughter, the groom could not on that account postpone the marriage, but had either to marry or to divorce his bride. But if the promise was made by the bride herself and she was unable to fulfill it to the groom might let her sit until her hair becomes gray. That is, until she could pay the sum that she was promised. Insistence upon the payment of dowry, however, was much decried by later authorities. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, as we have seen here, it was common practice for the daughters to pay dowries to their husbands. It was, and if you were too poor to afford for your daughter a much-needed aspect of life, then giving her service to another family was a way to make recompense to that. It was also a way to make restitution for crimes if you were a thief. If the thief is caught while breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there will be no blood guiltness on his account. But if the sum has risen on him, then will there be blood guiltness on his account. He shall surely make restitution. If he owes nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. It was also a way to look after people who were from the outside, the Eved Canaan, the non-Jewish slaves, who were taken as prisoners of war. But moving on to the Eved Canaan, this was also done in a love for them too. The goal of non-Jewish slavery was mainly to convert non-believers to becoming Israelites. According to the Sefer HaMashuk, a book written by a 13th century rabbi to educate his son as a part of the the Talmud, the plight of the Eved Canaan is harsher than the plight of the Eved Ivri. None of the mitzvot we saw earlier limit how a slave master treats an Eved Canaan. The master may sell the Eved Canaan at auction or assign the Eved Canaan oppressive or degrading work. In this mitzvah essay, the author explains the unique status of an Eved Canaan. The Eved Canaan is in a state intermediate between a Jew and a non-Jew. Specifically, a male Eved Canaan must agree to be circumcised and to give up idolatry. The Eved Canaan is required to do all things the mitzvah that the Jewish women are required to do. The Eved Canaan has 1 year after he is purchased to decide whether he agrees to these conditions. If the Eved Canaan does not agree, the master is required to sell him. End quote. The purpose is to convert him to Judaism, or to make sure he takes up these practices. But why? 2 reasons. It protects the Jews from falling into the temptation to worship idols at the hands of their slaves, as the Jews have been tempted to do. There is no shortage of Jews wanting to turn over the worship of the one true God of Israel and worship idols. even when they've seen miraculous works firsthand. Furthermore, it encourages more converts. If it is the case that God exists and He is that which none greater can exist, then what greater show of mercy is it to give somebody, as hard as it might be, through an institution, the one true way? So why any slavery at all, though? That is to say, why does God need this particular institution, not some other? Well, the first question is, why not? God may have reasons we are not aware of. If that is the case, and it is morally permissible, in principle at least, that God should be in a better position to see that this institution is better when it pertains to converting over people, to handling debt, handling prisoners, and paying over dowries than others. All things considered, he has better background knowledge. Second, the Jews were not rid of their attachment to slavery. Like most ancient people, slavery was the norm. However, at times, doctrines need to develop. Consider the fact that Jesus says in response to the Pharisees who asked why divorce was evil, Moses permitted it. Jesus says, Moses, for your hardness of heart, suffered to you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it hath not been so. Matthew 19:8. Likewise, in the beginning, there was no slavery or dominion over one man to another. That was also not intended. But of course, by that same reasoning and of relationship, Jesus would have to say that the reason slavery was permitted was because the Jews themselves had a hardness of heart that needed to develop over time. That is also understandable. Now that we have covered slavery in the Old Testament, we should probably move on to slavery addressed in the New Testament. In numerous places, Paul instructs that slaves, quote, in all things obey those who are your earthly masters. This sentiment is found in Colossians 3:22, Ephesians 6:5, and Titus 2:9. Some would say that this is a tacit approval of the institution of slavery, but this doesn't need to be the case. Let's see what Paul has to say elsewhere about obeying the government. According to Romans 13:1-7, we read the following. Every person is subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, for those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do you do what is good, and you will have praise from the same, for it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. Therefore, it is necessary to be in subjugation, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because this you pay taxes, for rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. Render all what is due to them, tax to whom tax is due, custom to custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Note that Paul is saying this at the time of Emperor Nero, who was persecuting Christians, and yet we are still called to obey. Yet no one would say Paul approves of pagan Roman governance ruled by an anti-Christian persecutor of the faith. The reason Paul commands that citizens be obedient to pagan governors and slaves obedient to slave owners is given in the prior chapter. Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor that which is evil, cleave to that which is good. In love of thy brethren be tenderly affectionate one to another. In honor preferred one another. In diligence not slothful, fervent in spirit, serving God, rejoicing in hope, patent in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer, communicating to the necessities of the saints, given to hospitality. Bless them that persecute you, bless and not curse. Rejoice with them that rejoice, weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind one towards another. Set not your mind on high things, but condescend to things that were lowly. Be not wise in your own conceits. Render to no man evil for evil. Take thought for things honorable in the sight of all men. It is possible as much as it in you lieth. Be at peace with all men. Avenge not yourselves, beloved, but give place unto the wrath of God. For it is written, Vengeance belongeth to me. I will recompense, saith the Lord. But if thine enemies hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in doing thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Christians are supposed to fight against the evils of the world, slavery and bad governance included, not by revolutionary means, but rather non-violently. And as people know, non-violence resistance is powerful in its own right. There is a rich history in many countries of this. Ultimately, Christian slave owners are called to treat their slaves as free men, though. Onesimus, an escaped slave, went and worked with Paul on mission. Paul, sending him back to his slave master Philemon, wrote to his master, quote, "For perhaps he was therefore parted from thee for a season, that thou shouldest have him forever, no longer as a servant, but more than a servant, a brother beloved especially to me. But how much rather to thee, both in the flesh and in the Lord, if then thou countest me as a partner, receive him as myself. But if he hath wronged thee at all, or oweth thee aught, put that to mine account. I, Paul, write it with my own hand. I will repay it, that I shall not say to thee, thou owest to me even thine own self besides." Philemon 1:15-19. Note that he is to be treated as Paul is treated, that is, as a free man, and that if he were to owe Philemon anything, let Paul repay him back. It seems to me that this is the Christian ideal, for the Christian to treat one another with indifference to the institution of slavery. That corresponds to what Paul says. There is neither Jew nor Greek, neither is there slave nor free man, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Galatians 3:28. All Christians are equal in faith. No Christian is more or less worthy of his faith over one another. It makes no sense that a slave master would have any special privilege by dint of wealth. Paul does not preach the prosperity gospel, after all. With that, I end my time, and I wait with bated breath for my opponents.
All right, thank you very much there, CF. Yeah, you have approximately the same amount of time. That did run right over 10 minutes. I was like 15.
I apologize. I was reading from points, and I did not see the group chat.
That's fine. So, that's quite all right. People have asked what were you reading from. Can you point out again what you were reading from? Because that is a question out there real quick.
What's this? Oh, so I quoted a lot of scripture, but is there anything specifically that you wanted?
Other than the scripture, was another source they can get that?
Oh, let's see. So yeah, I quoted it from this part of the Talmud. It's
the Sefer Hanuk. How do you pronounce that?
Yeah, you got it. It's fine.
Okay.
Hanuk,
yeah. Well, my little Yiddish background. I know how to say Kepala. That's about it. All right, so EA, go ahead and take about 10 or 15 minutes, and you can either do your opener.
Okay.
Because obviously he threw a lot of stuff out there, so go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, but we got time to cover everything.
All right.
Well, first thing I want to say, thanks for even taking this debate, CF, Catholic Fusionist, which is your new name now. Surprised you chose this topic. Well, the first thing I want to do, I'm going to try to address, I'm not going to try to address everything that you just said, but I am going to, first of all, go back over the definition of omnibenevolence. You just spoke on it. You spoke on it, but you spoke on it lightly. This is a part of the title of the debate. Is slavery comparable, or is it compatible with an omnibenevolent deity? I say totally not. I don't even think the God of the Bible is benevolent. But to define omnibenevolence is basically from the Latin, meaning all, complete. It means everything. Now we could go into, I guess we could get into later, a philosophical debate of what does the all mean? What is the completion of omni? What does it mean? But just from a theological standpoint, as contrasted and compared to other attributes of this biblical deity that we're specifically speaking about tonight, and that my proposition is against, then these particular attributes are also contrasted with omniscience and omnipotence, all powerful, all knowing. Many philosophers basically have argued that it's basically impossible, or at least improbable, for any deity to exhibit such a property alongside omniscience and omnipotence, as a result of what is known as the problem of evil and the problem of hell. And hopefully I'll get into that later on. Then I'm going to get into Exodus 21 and Leviticus 25, in which the Catholic Fusionist, he read over, but he didn't actually go into. I'm going to actually put up some, share some screens and go into the Hebrew and to explain the different terms of what he went over from the 13th century writing, and tried to explain the Ebed from the Sephira, what he actually read from, which I read years ago. But it seems as though the Catholic Fusionist, Max, is basically arguing for indentured servitude. And And if that's the case, and I hope I'm not straw manning him, but it seems that's what he's doing. He's trying to make it seem as if basically he asked the question, why not? He said, God may have reasons that we just might not understand. I think that's ridiculous for us to think that way, because if there's a God and he allows certain things that we deem immoral, if he allows these things to happen and we don't have an understanding of it, then how can we explain this God to people for them to understand? If God does things that is above your understanding, then there's no way you can explain this. The only person can explain this will be God himself. So I'm going to get off into Exodus 21. I don't know if I'm going to do it on this first rebuttal, but I'm going to show these verses because I want the people that are listening inside the chat to actually see what I'm doing. And I'm going to show how in Leviticus 25, how basically the Bible expands the law of slavery to other nations. Now, the indentured servitude argument is simply bad. It's bad apologetics. It's also false that the Bible just advocates for indentured servitude. I just want to make that known. Also, and I'm going to show this later. Also, we don't even know, and just speaking on what the Hebrew word sakir, or what he mentioned as hired servant. Honestly, if I just speak on that and not the other nations of Ebed, if I just speak on the sakir, right, which is what we consider hired servants or bond servants, we don't even know if that is moral or not. We don't even know if that's good, because there are no safety net for this type of contract in the Bible. It was open for exploitation, and I'm going to show that. This could very well be immoral too. We just don't know. It was very problematic as far as the rules in the Bible for it. I mean, I think it makes no sense. But I mean, examples when you're talking about just the hired servant part, because I'm going to get on other part later, as I said. Just for example, just say you wanted a plot of land. Okay, serve 6 years to this guy. If you wanted a cow or maybe a few goats, okay, give me 6 years, serve 6 years. Say you wanted 2 cows. What is that, 6 years or 12 years? So none of it is basically coherent within the Bible. It's just not coherent. Then there are loopholes when we talk about hired servants. As a matter of fact, I want to show this loophole. It's in Exodus 21:6. I'm going to show this. I think I got enough time to do this. Okay, 1 second, y'all. This is in Exodus 2. Can y'all see the screen, Steve?
You are being presented.
Can you see it?
No, we can't see the screen, though. We did. I saw something for a second, though.
Huh?
You might want to pause his time right now. So you might want to pause his time right now so we can make up for the technical difficulties.
Yeah, it's not showing a screen. It was there for a second.
Okay, hold 1 second. 1 second. Hold 1 second. I'll get there in a minute. I want to make sure I get this because I actually want to show this particular verse. For some reason.
Steve, did you pause your timer?
Oh, Can
you do that?
Here.
Okay, all right, no problem.
I'm not going to be rigid on time, obviously. I mean,
can you see that? Can y'all see that?
No, sir.
Can't. Okay, well, it's not showing. Well, anyway, for some reason it's not sharing. I don't know why. My screen is not sharing. Hold 1 second. Hold 1 second, y'all. I don't know.
But I will make sure he gets the equal amount of time that you had.
Okay, good. Okay. I should be screen sharing now.
Yep, so we can see it.
You can see where I'm at now right now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. This is not the particular one, but I'm going to go to it. In Exodus, it's 21. Matter of fact, excuse me. I'm going to show this particular loophole, even for the hired, before I even get off into the, before I get off into the Ebed. And this is Hebrews 21, verse 2-6. And this is a loophole that is basically used. Even and this is what I'm saying about not even a safety net. It's not even a safety net in the Bible, even for what would you consider indentured servants. It says in verse 2 that if you buy a Hebrew servant, everybody can see this clear. It says if you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve for 6 years. but in the 7th year he shall go free without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife when he comes, she is to go with him. But here's verse 4. But if his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, and do not want to go free, then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he shall be his servant. Now, this right here is basically, let me go back. Let me take this off. Okay, basically, that is a loophole for people to think about this. What type of family values does an omnibenevolent God show here, to the point where if a man, if a master gives this servant a wife, of course, in his mind, he said, well, I know if he have kids by this particular woman, then I can trick him, because this man is automatically going to love his woman and his children. He's automatically going to probably want to stay with me forever. That's a loophole. That's immoral to me. So, I mean, people should be able to see this. Do people see my regular screen now? My regular screen showing now?
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, I can see you on camera now.
Okay, good. So these are loopholes that even when we're dealing with indentured servants, it's really not a good thing. So now, before I even get off into the verses, because I'm glad my screen sharing working, and that was happening with me last time, my last debate. My computer was messing up on me. But it basically comes down to this, and basically what Catholic Fusionist said. He said, well, what is the righteous? And this is a question I have to ask. What is righteous or divine about slavery? You know, this is something that is not, this is something that I just have to say. It basically comes down to theists wanting so bad. They want so bad to soften the Bible's message on slavery and other topics, because it simply can't be wrong. And this is just the bottom line. This is how I was when I was a theist. It simply can't be wrong, because if the Bible says something immoral, then basically it would be devastating to their position. That's why we should continue to engage these topics on the Bible, and I will always be happy to engage in debates like this. To me, there's a sort of mental gymnastics that people must go through, you know, to basically try to justify the Bible as being some moral divine book from an all-loving deity, an omnibenevolent deity. It just does not compute. It is not a coherent position to take. Some religion, you know, religion is something that basically makes the smartest people relinquish dignity and humanity and self-worth. Think about this. An omnibenevolent God, just a benevolent God, even in this day and time, when we compare the African slave trade, we compare the Middle Passage, and then we sit back and say, well, the Bible wasn't the same way. How much time do I have, Steve? Because I want to go into other verses.
You have, let's see, he took about almost 20 minutes, so you still have about another 10 minutes. Give it another.
Sure? Okay, good. Okay, good. If that's okay with
he ran a little over.
Okay, good. No problem.
I would take at least another 15 to 20 minutes as your time.
Okay, good. Well, okay, good. I want to go back into my other verses then. According to the Bible, when we look at the Bible, there seems to be a separate morality for Jews, or what is called God's chosen people, and other people. There's a separate morality there. When you go to Exodus 21, let me go back to this, and I'm going to share this as well. If y'all don't mind, I want to go back and share this as well. Okay. Okay, I don't want to do that, though. That's the wrong thing. This thing here just don't want to act right. Do it, man. Okay, here we go. My fault, y'all. My fault. Can y'all see that?
No, it's just showing you.
Can y'all see that, Steve?
No.
You can't see it? Why is it just making me show an entire screen? I don't know why.
There you go.
Okay. Can y'all see this now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can you see just Exodus? Okay, this is Exodus 21, 20 through 21. It says that anyone who beats their male or female slave, now we're talking about an omnibenevolent God here. Anyone who beats their male or female slave with a rod must be punished if the slave dies as a direct result. And this is coming from the New International Version. There's so many different versions, but I pick this version sometimes I get the English version. but they are not to be punished if the slave recovers after a day or two, since the slave is their property. Now think about this verse for a minute. This is a rule that's saying that you can beat this slave or basically almost to death, but long as this slave live or recovers after a day or two, then you know it's okay because you're the property of that slave. I mean, you're the property of another person. That's not benevolent. That's nothing good about that. I don't care what time period you put it in. And this is something we can't keep allowing propaganda of the Bible and people who are for things like this to keep trying to set things and say things are different from back then. I mean, we can't just keep saying this. I'm going to Exodus 21. Excuse me. Let me erase this because this is what 26 through 27. We make this one. Oh, 1 second. And let me know when my time is getting there, Steve. I don't want to go over.
I will.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Maximum, take another 7 minutes. Is that fair?
How long I got, Steve?
7 minutes. Is that okay?
Thank you, sir. Okay. Exodus 21, 26 through 27. It says, a owner who hits a male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. Now, I want y'all to take into conversation here the law that Moses came with, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But this is not the same. This shows that the slave is not equal to other humans. It says, owner who hits a male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. And the owner who knocks out the tooth of a male or female slave must let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth. This just basically shows that there's no equality nowhere in this particular thing. Now, as I move on to Exodus 21, 28 through 32. Now, this is a strange thing here because this is about a bull or what we call an ox in the Hebrew, or a matah, what it's called in Hebrew. It says, verse 28, if a bull gores a man, and I'm just showing the equality and how slaves were looked at. These are why I'm showing these verses, to show how humans were looked at and how this was allowed by omnibenevolent God, who was also supposed to be omniscience. Omniscience meaning all-knowing, who should have known that centuries and centuries later, this will be rejected by society. It says, if a bull gores a man or a woman to death, the bull is to be stoned to death, and its meat must not be eaten. But the owner of the bull would not be held responsible. Okay. Verse 29. If, however, the bull has had the habit of goring and the owner has been warned, but has not kept it pinned up, and it kills a man or woman, the bull is to be stoned, and its owner also is to be put to death. However, okay, this is changing a whole nother complete thought. If payment is demanded, the owner may redeem his life by the payment of whatever is demanded. So in other words, this owner can either be stoned if he's been warned about this crazy bull, or he can either just pay for ransom, whatever the people want to ask for. Then 31 says, this law also applies if the bull gores a son or daughter. If the bull gores a male or female slave, though, this is verse 32, what I want y'all to pay attention to. If the bull gores a male or female slave, the owner must pay 30 shekels of silver to the master of the slave, and the bull is to be stoned to death. So you see here the differentiation. Right here, if a bull kills a male or female slave, we don't really care. You just pay 30 shekels, and it's okay, because a slave life doesn't mean anything, not only to the Jews, but nor does a slave life mean anything to God. Okay, moving on to Leviticus, I want to show the differentiation. This shows basic distinction between what we call hired servants and slaves. Now, this is very important right here. I'm going to read from I'm going to read from 39 to 46, basically. And I want everybody to pay, excuse me. I want everybody to pay attention to this. Starting at 39. Okay. Now, starting at 39, Leviticus 25. It says, if your brother, and this is meaning within context, keeping everything in context means your Hebrew brother or your Israelite brother. If your brother becomes impoverished with regard to you, and I think the Catholic Fusionist mentioned this, but he didn't really explain it. If your brother becomes impoverished with regard to you so that he sells himself to you, you must not subject him to slave service. Now, I want to show you something, because this shows a major distinction. It said you must not subject him to slave service. He must be with you. He must be with you as a hired worker, or what we call in the Hebrew a sakir, as a resident foreigner. He must serve with you until the year of Jubilee. I'll get into Jubilee later. That's a 50-year thing for Jews. That's why I say even the hired servant thing is open up for exploitation. But I'll get into that later, maybe in question and answer.
Yeah, I think you're not running out of time right now, so we want to wrap it up.
I'm running out of time?
Sure.
Okay. But then he may go free, he and his children with him, and may return to his family and to the property of his ancestors. Since they are my servants whom I brought out of the land of Egypt, they must not be sold in a slave sale. You must not rule over him harshly, but you must fear God. As for the male and female slaves who may belong to you, you may buy male and female slaves from the nations all around you. Also, you may buy slaves from the children of the foreigners who reside with you and from their families that are with you, whom they have fathered in your land, that they may become your property. You may give them an inheritance to your children after you possess this property. You may enslave them perpetually, means forever. However, as for your brothers, the Israelites, no man may rule over his brother harshly. And this term harshly is overda. It's telling you that we know that slavery was harsh to other people. This is differentiation, and this is where omnibenevolent God just doesn't fit.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. CF, do you want to go straight into a rebuttal for that? I think you had very strong openers, but I think do you want to address some of the things he had said?
First, okay, yeah, I definitely will do that. The first thing I wanted,
5 minutes or 10 minutes time in this because we are running way over.
All right,
10 minutes.
10 minutes should be fine. You good with it, Emperor Atheist?
Yeah.
Time starts now.
Cool.
Go.
Cool. So one thing that Emperor Atheist said was it's important to address these because ultimately really smart people end up lowering themselves and defending immoralities that they wouldn't have done otherwise. Well, I can't speak for every other Christian or other person, but personally, I like just taking the contrarian viewpoint on anything, even back when I myself was an atheist. So I'd still, so I can only speak for myself there. I've always loved being glutton for punishment. And in any case, to get to your more meatier points, in terms of skeptical theism, like why not? As I said earlier, I think your argument was, how can we explain X if we cannot comprehend X? How could we explain God if there are some things about him that are so mysterious? Well, just because some things are mysterious in terms of high levels doesn't mean that there isn't a lower strata that we can't comprehend. So, for example, when we talk about physics, when we talk about it on the macroscopic level, everything seems pretty common sense. We can understand in Newtonian mechanics, yet at the quantum level, that's where we start seeing some mysteries. It doesn't overturn the Newtonian stuff. It just means that at a certain level, we're really just having a hard time comprehending it, but we should just take solace in the fact that things work up until now, and we can look to resolving any mysteries later on if we can. In terms of your other comments on biblical openness, the Bible provides no set price for the slave life, for labor. How much is 7 years of labor as compared to any other thing? Well, in terms of something along the lines of an economy, something has its price determined insofar as someone values it, or they value giving it up because they're willing to exchange it for some other thing. You find yourself thinking, well, 7 years as a Jewish slave at the very least, well, 7 years as a slave still beats the entire rest of my life in poverty, so I'll just go with that. Plus, in terms of safety nets, there are two ways of understanding the law. There's the spirit of the law, and then there's the letter of the law. If one looks at the American Constitution for much of its earlier life did not prevent slavery itself, and yet it took, nor did anyone look at it and think same-sex marriage was to be permitted under it. In fact, there are a lot of things that we didn't have understood in the law of the Constitution when it was penned, but later when you extrapolate it and its logic, some other things follow from that. There is the law, and then there's the precedents which come from it, and for that you actually have a Jewish oral tradition that goes beside it, that's meant to express safety nets, concerns, factors of well-being for both the master and the slave, and so forth. The next thing to look at is the exploitation of the loophole in Exodus 21. If one reads the 4th verse, the term used is yatan in Hebrew, which means give, or sometimes translated as grant. The slave, there's nowhere indicating in that verse that the slave has to take up his wife and children. It was only if he agreed to it and if it was offered. But here's the thing: nobody in a position of slavery, in good conscience, could want that position. In fact, I think this was more of a deterrent, if anything. If somebody knows that the rest of their life and their family's life was taken up in slavery if they took the offer, then they'd be less likely to do it. And why would someone need this to be done in the first place? Well, you're not really in a good position to look after your wife and kids if you're in the position of a debtor or a slave. I think this was to mostly encourage taking up the position of being a family man after your debt was settled. So that, I think that would be the most generous reading of the logic given in that verse. Next, we have a double morality given between Jews and non-Jews. Well, yes, there is a double morality because the Jews, as a covenant people, have a different mission from God than the other nations of the earth. Their mission is to bring about the Messiah. And of course, they're going to have institutions which shield them from their Canaanite slaves or their non-Jewish slaves bringing in idols to tempt them. So such harsh punishments would be understandable given that context. Furthermore, when it comes to Exodus 21, verses 28 to 32, the law there applies to slaves killed by accident, not in terms of willful or neglected killing. At least as far as I understood those verses, I could, in terms of the law, I would say that making recompense for the life of the slave towards the master would be understandable, or even because he was there to settle a debt with him. The bull is to be stoned, and that would also be the person's loss there as well. I believe the guy only comes to a punishment whether the free man or the slave is killed by the bull if it was done in absolute neglect. Let's see, another thing was brought up in terms of beating one slave with reference to, what was it, verse? Sorry, I'm just looking for it. So, slaveholders were, all right, Exodus 21, 19 to 21. The verse there only applies to the Eved Canaan, as the Eved Ivri were not to be ruled with rigor, per Leviticus 25:53. And furthermore, no one would want to beat their Eved Canaan unprovoked, given that it would mean a loss of money. After all, the term property, kaspa, forgive me for the terrible Hebrew, which translates to property, also means silver or money. It would be at a loss. The reason a Jew would have to, imaginably, with reason, beat an Eved Canaan is because prisoners of war were also amongst their numbers, and it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that one needs to defend themselves from people who are taken from captivity to work for you out of humiliation. Furthermore, this rule was used in such a way that to know if that person was responsible for their death. After all, that person would be punished if it was within the few days, and afterwards, if not, a good rule of thumb of understanding is another complication could have been the reason why that death would have happened. And lastly, when it comes to understanding why it might have been permitted, a point taken under consideration is not because it reflects the character of God, but rather the character of the Jews to which he permitted certain institutions. After all, Jesus himself permitted divorce, even though that was not the intention of marriage in the beginning. Why could it not be the case that slavery was the same thing, despite the fact that because slavery itself was not the intention in the beginning for man to be ruled by another man, it was only instituted because of the Jews' hardness of heart as well. How much time do I have left?
You are exactly 3 minutes, actually 2 minutes away from when you need to stop. Now a little under 2 minutes.
All right. So, well, I think I got all the points spoken about. Yeah, I think I'm good. I would be happy to advocate the rest of my time to the Emperor Atheist.
All right, Emperor Atheist, you have 10 minutes. Your time begins now.
Okay. Seems to me that the Catholic Fusionist, I mean, I love the debate so far, but it seems to me that he's basically twisting these verses. I really would love to just particularly just get into all of the Hebrew, and I'm going to get into Hebrew now because I love that language really, and I really would like to get more into the Hebrew thought. I don't know where he's getting a lot of these things from, but that's why I want to kind of stick with the Bible and what it says. But he did agree with me, and it kind of contradicts a position. I'm not going to say totally contradicts a position, but he did agree with me when I brought up a separate morality. Seems like this omnibenevolent God has this separate morality for Jews and for other people. He agreed with me because, and this was his reasons for agreeing with me, because he said, well, simply because these people has to bring about the Messiah. Well, the Messiah hasn't came yet. So many religions have had Messiahs. Why should we respect a chosen people just because they thinking about bringing about a Messiah? This goes back to religious belief, and it's really not answering the question of omnibenevolence of God. And I want to go back to this word. Omnibenevolence means all loving, period. It means all loving. It doesn't mean all loving to just Yehuda or the Jews, or all loving to just the tribes of Israel or the Ishmaelites or the Canaanites. All loving should well, at least in philosophy, all covers a 360-degree thing. So to say that there's a double standard for these Jews, this is kind of it's kind of contradictory, and it's kind of just seems you're just defending the Bible simply because the Bible just can't be wrong, because the God in the Bible can't be wrong. And basically it's going back to, if God say so, then that's what it is. And this, I mean, I could go with Islam with this. The Quran plays tribalism too. They actually took the tribalism of divine command theory from the descendants of Isaac, and basically those who are familiar with the Quran, they switched it to Ishmael, and Prophet Muhammad came through this line. So now Prophet Muhammad became the chosen prophet. It's all tribalism. The Indians do it in their scripture. Everybody is God's people when it comes down to these books, but it doesn't actually answer the question of how can an omnibenevolent being, and like I said, I haven't even got into the problem of evil. Why is so much? Why is there so much evil in the world? And this is a question I probably want to ask you in the end. If God is omnibenevolent and omnipotent at the same time, then he has the power to curtail all this evil. But I want to go on, and I want to actually speak on, if I have enough time, Steve, I want to actually even speak about this omnibenevolent God. These particular Jews or Hebrews in the Bible even sell their own daughters as sex slaves.
You've only been talking for 4 minutes, so you've got 6 minutes.
I have 4 minutes?
No, you've only been talking for 4 minutes.
Okay, so I have 6 more minutes?
Correct.
Okay, well, let me go to Exodus 7:8 if y'all don't mind. I just want to show this. For some reason, it just ain't letting me do that like that. I don't know why, man, but okay, that's okay. Can everybody see my screen?
You are presenting.
Everybody see my screen?
Yes. Okay,
you see what? Okay, cool. It says in Exodus 21:7-8. Now, this is coming from a benevolent God, a God that should be, I think should be equal across all time periods and cultures. This is another problem that theists and Christian apologists, Catholics, and none of these people can ever answer. Why is this God morality seems to change with time periods? Because if you ask anybody today, would anybody sell their daughter as a female slave? I mean, who would do that right now? So it says in Exodus 21:7-8, if a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go free as the male slaves do. If she is displeasing in the eye, this is sexual content, by the way. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He does not have authority to sell her to a foreign people because of his unfairness to her. Now, this is obviously okay by God of the Bible. Back then, obviously, I guess it's not okay now. I don't know. And I'm sure it's not okay now because no Hebrews or Jews will be doing this today. But this is something that we have to put into question. Why would a God have laws like this that would only expand over a certain amount of a certain archaic period? I say because archaic men wrote the Bible. But we're just going to, just for the sake of argument, this omnibenevolent God exists. I don't see how we could accept a deity like this. And I want to show this if I have time. This is from this is actually from a Catholic research group, because the Wingard, if you're familiar with this, the Wingard Institute, anybody can look it up for Catholic research. And this is just a timeline of teaching authority and slavery. If you look at 326 AD, it says the local council at Gangra in Asia Minor excommunicates anyone encouraging a slave to despise his master or withdraw from his service. Became part of church law from the 13th century. 354 to 430 AD, or I like to say CE. St. Augustine teaches, and everybody knows who St. Augustine is. St. Augustine teaches that the institution of slavery derives from God and is beneficial to slaves and masters, quoted by many later popes as proof of tradition. Okay. And why do these people believe? Why did the early church people, Catholic, even though the Catholic Church, after a little while, they did, we got to keep it fair, they did speak against slavery, yeah, late in the 17th century. But why did all these people believe this? Because the Bible taught it. 650 AD, Pope Martin I condemns people who teach slaves about freedom or who encourages them to escape. That's not benevolence at all, especially not omnibenevolence. 1089 AD, the Synod of Melfi under Pope Urban II imposed slavery on the wives of the priests, became part of church law from the 13th century. 1179 AD, the Third Lateran Council imposed slavery on those helping the Saracens. 1226 AD, the legitimacy of slavery is incorporated in the Corpus Juris Canonici, promulgated by Pope Gregory IX, which remained official law of the church until 1913. Canon lawyers worked out 4 just titles for holding slaves: slaves captured in war, persons condemned to slavery for a crime, persons selling themselves into slavery, including father selling his child, children of a mother who was a slave. These are all church people guided by the omnibenevolent God. And here's my favorite, 1224 through 1274 AD. St. Thomas Aquinas, everybody knows who Aquinas is, one of the great Western Christian thinkers, defends slavery as instituted by God. Now, if y'all notice, these people, and everybody who's familiar with just a little bit with Aquinas knows that he was basically a student of the Bible. So he felt like that slavery was instituted by God in punishment for sin and justified as being a part of the right of nations and natural law. Children of a slave mother are rightly slaves, even though they have not committed personal sin. Makes no sense, but this is what these people believe. Quoted by many later popes, and I do have backup researched historicity to back all this up. Pope Eugenius IV condemns the indiscriminate enslavement of natives in Canary Islands, but does not condemn slavery as such. That was one good thing. Through the bull Romanus Pontifex, Pope Nicholas V authorizes the King of Portugal to enslave all the Saracen and pagan people his armies may conquer. 1493, Pope Alexander VI authorizes the King of Spain to enslave non-Christians of the Americas who are at war with Christian powers. All of this is obviously under the guise of a benevolent God or omnibenevolent God. 1537 AD. How much time do I have, Steve?
You have approximately 2 minutes.
Cool. Maybe. Pope Paul III condemns the indiscriminate enslavement of Indians in South America. That's a great thing. 1537, he condemns it. 1548, the same Pope III confirms the right of clergy and laity to own slaves. Contradictory, very contradictory. Just 11 years later, something changed his mind. He condemns indiscriminate enslavement of Indians in South America, 1537. And in 1548, he says, yes, the right of the clergy and the laity to own slaves, because they'll make money off of it. Okay, his own people can do it. It's cool. God ordains it. Pope Urban VIII denounces the indiscriminate enslavement of Indians in South America without denying the 4 just titles for owning slaves. So in other words, he denounced it indiscriminately, but he don't deny the 4 just titles within their own laws. 1741 AD, Pope Benedict the 14th condemns the indiscriminate enslavement of natives in Brazil, but does not denounce slavery as such, nor the importation of slaves from Africa. 1839, Pope Gregory the 16th condemns the international Negro slave trade, which is good, but does not question slavery as such, nor the domestic slave trade. And I'll explain that. He condemns it in word of mouth, but he does not, in other words, he does not actually go through with it and actually explains why it's bad. 1866 AD, the Holy, now this is very important. The Holy Office in an instruction signed by Pope Pius IX declares, slavery itself, considered as such in its essential nature, is not at all contrary to the natural and divine law. That we go back with the divine command theory. And there can be several just titles of slavery, and these are referred to by the approved theologians, whoever they are, and commentators of the sacred canons. It is not contrary to the natural and divine law for a slave to be sold, bought, exchanged, or given. Now, as you see down here, this is the turnaround. Why did they turn around? Look at this. 1866, 1865 was Abraham Lincoln in America, by the way, who had basically started leading the West after the Civil War, actually signed the Proclamation of Emancipation. So now all of a sudden it's a turnaround with the Catholic Church. 1888, Pope Leo III condemns slavery in more general terms and supports the anti-slavery movement. Great, I give him a hand clap. 1918, the new code of canon law promulgated by Pope Benedict XV condemns selling any person as a slave. There's no condemnation for owning slaves, however. No condemnation for owning them. 1965. Okay, the Second Vatican Council defends basic human rights and denounces all violations of human integrity. But why did it take so long? It was not divinely inspired for them to stop slaves, but it was okay for them to have slaves by divine command. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. CF, do you want to do more of a free-form back and forth at this point? I think you guys have some long presentations. You guys have a lot of things to talk about. So if you guys want to just go back and forth.
Yeah, actually, I wouldn't mind a back and forth myself. That would be pretty interesting.
It is all I'm going to step away for a few. Do it, do your thing.
Sure, Emperor Atheist. Would you mind if we go over the the list of things you just read over? Because Catholic tradition is something I think I want to touch on this one.
Okay.
All right. So just in terms of just in terms of understanding the group that you did read from is they claim to be a Catholic organization, but just from the onset they are teaching something. Their main goal is to show that the title of women priests is compatible with Catholic teaching. They're trying to switch it, and their main argument is, look, in terms of what has been taught by tradition, slavery was also taught by tradition. We turn that around. Why not women priests?
Right.
So you'd agree that there is kind of an established goal there. Now, I don't want to.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, all right. So this is kind of why I have a. Now, without trying to make an ad hominem attack concerning your source, I just want to point something out. I think that this does. I have some concerns about this source cherry-picking data, because just off the top of my head, I can think of one scholastic thinker in the 12th century, Duns Scotus, who actually advocated that slavery itself was contrary to nature.
Yeah, Duns Scotus did do.
Yeah, and just as another reference, Thomas Aquinas, he wasn't just inspired by the Bible. There's also an understanding that this was good for the sake of natural law, because he was also inspired by Aristotle, who taught in the Nicomachean Ethics that slavery itself was actually perfectly natural, because some men are born great and some men are born to be tools. If one looks at scholastic teaching, it wasn't just the Bible. They also got a lot from Greek philosophy as well. So it wasn't just one biblical source. And I think there was kind of a lot of sources going on there. But one last person I want to defend here is St. Augustine, who says, by nature, then, in the condition in which God first created man, no man is the slave either of another man or of sin. But it is also true that servitude itself is ordained as a punishment by the law, which enjoins the preservation of the order of nature and forbids its disruption. For if nothing has been done in violation of that law, there would have been no need for the discipline of the servitude as a punishment. The apostle, therefore, admonishes servants to be obedient to their masters and to serve them loyally and with goodwill, so that if they cannot be freed by their masters, they can at least make their own slavery to some extent free. They can do this not by serving with cunning fear, but in faithful love, until all unrighteousness shall cease and all authority and power be put down, and God may be all within all. It seems that Augustine's viewpoint is that slavery itself seems to be just a part of the fallen world. And I don't really see how that's contrary to anything I'm saying, which is slavery exists, or as it existed, was an institution. It was something that God doesn't establish, but man does. And at the same time, if God is going to go about by overturning it, wouldn't he therefore use some other means rather than an apprehensive one or a revolutionary one, but instead something along the lines of nonviolent resistance, something which could turn the slave master into a Christian, and in the long run, help him become, in the long run, actually create a culture where people are less incentivized to own slaves. Wouldn't that, to me, I think that would be the way of understanding Augustine's point, rather than someone who just thinks across the board it's all fine and dandy. I think it was just taught as just a way of, yeah, you know what, I think I'm going on here needlessly. I apologize.
Okay, well, I want to keep it in context, because we're not here to actually defend Augustine, but right. We know this for a fact historically. And Augustine, a lot of people during these particular times changed their views. A lot of the church figures, we could say, changed their particular views. We're actually particularly speaking on slavery being compatible with the omnibenevolent deity, and I just don't see how slavery, and we don't even have to talk about the transatlantic slave of Africans. Let's just talk about the Bible. The Bible particularly shows a distinction, as I said, between Jews, hired servants, as you mentioned, which Hebrew word is sakir, and the distinction between the ebed or the abedo, ebed, the slaves who actually means to toil. And let me say something else about this word ebed. Ebed is also used for prophets, for some prophets, or nabi in Hebrew. They're used for some prophets and some messengers, but it's in a different sense of the word being used as a slave of Yahweh, or a slave of Yahweh Elohim, meaning that you're just slaving to do my message. But when ebed is not used, when it's used for a non-prophet or a non-messenger of Yahweh, then it is a terrible thing. It is not benevolent. There's nothing benevolent about it. And as I said, we can't really tell, even if indentured servitude of the Hebrews doing it to themselves is even moral. I don't see a moral landscape that could even be, if you're saying, people use the excuse of indentured servitude to say, well, you're paying off something, or maybe you want something, you want a new car or whatever. So you want to work for this man for 6 years. And I have to touch up on what you said about, you said, basically you addressed my loophole, which I'm glad you did. You said that the woman that I guess that the master would give him, you said he didn't have to take it. Is that what you said?
Yes, because the term grants indicates that it's an offer. It's not necessarily
well, this is why I say it's a loophole. It wasn't mandatory, but the thing is, what human, a man wouldn't want to, if he's going to be living with this man or working on this farm for 6-7 years, what human would turn down the chance to say, hey, man, you have your own woman here. Here goes a beautiful woman, or I don't know how they maybe look, but say, here goes a beautiful woman, man. You can have her for your wife. If he didn't come with his own wife, what man would basically turn that down? And this is why I say that's a loophole. It's trickery to me. Because I want to take her, and if he have kids,
you're talking to the wrong guy here, because I am a 26-year-old virgin.
Okay. You what? Say that again.
I'm a 26-year-old virgin.
Man,
so I have turned down women before, so it's not like.
Oh Lord, so, we got to have another debate on that. We got to have a debate on that, Steve. Okay.
We'll plan ahead on that one.
But let me ask you this though, Max.
Right.
Because you did mention it, and I maybe just didn't actually get everything you said. But what do you think? What is divine or righteous about owning humans? Period. In any time period context, and why we don't view this civilization with the same ancient books? Why we don't view slavery the same way? Then why we don't see slavery as being okay now?
Oh, okay. So I did go on to this in my introduction. I made a distinction between the slavery of the Bible and the slavery of man. So in principle, why I think slavery is wrong is a man cannot give or take what is not his. So I could not voluntarily sell myself into slavery. I think that's not just a contradiction in terms. I don't even have the power over my own life to say, yeah, I'm your slave now. It strikes me as just being a fiction at that point, nor can any man take my life, because it's not his to own. Rather, I think all human life is God's, and I think any institution that does it by the authority of mankind is always going to be in the wrong. That's why it requires divine dispensation, because that life is God's to give or to allow one man to have over another's, not one man to voluntarily give over, nor another man to involuntarily take. That would be the main reason why.
Okay, well, the Bible, I mean, Moses commanded, I mean, in various places, in Numbers 13, when they went to war, I mean, they took women, they killed women, other women who hadn't been virgins. And I can find this verse if you're not familiar with it.
Oh, no, yeah,
Numbers
31.
Familiar with the verse, Numbers 31? I mean, Moses, when they went to war, they committed genocide against, and I still want to keep it in context with the omnibenevolent God who actually commanded these Israelites, man, to go to nations and kill them, Not always nations who started wars with the Israelites or who took anything or spoils from the Israelites, but just because we want your land, this God, because you keep referring to this divine thing. In other words, if God's behind it, it's okay. And I think that's dangerous because this is the same thing we get from Islamic fundamentalists. And I'm not trying to compare you or your catechism to Islamic fundamentalists, but it is the same because an Islamic fundamentalist says that Allah is behind me. And if America is against me, then we should kill them. They really believe that they're going to some heaven with 72 versions. They believe this religiously. Why? Because it's in their book, it's in their hadith, it's in their man-made Sharia laws and all these different things. But this is the same with Christianity. That you put God, as long as God is behind it, it seems to soften the morality of the core. And it's just not, I don't think it's a good proposition to take. Because like I said, you look at Moses, you look at what he did. They would kill the regular women. If they weren't virgins, they would kill them. They would kill the men and the boys. But Moses would say, save all the virgin girls. That's kind of sickening. First of all, how would you know they were virgins? Did your soldiers, when y'all got off the horses or whatever, did y'all go and check all the women who were virgins? How did you know they were virgins? I think that's sick within itself. That you would even, I guess you would touch them and see that their hymen hadn't been broken. I don't know, how did you go about doing that? Or did Yahweh just magically tell you who were virgins? I think that's something that an omnibenevolent God wouldn't allow. I just don't see an talking about well, not even omnibenevolence, Max, just benevolence. I don't see how we could see a world like that with an omnibenevolent God that would allow kids to be bashed in the stone. You go to Hosea 13:16. It says that he said, when you get there, just bash these children's brains against the walls. Psalms 137 says the same thing. Just kill children. And I don't want to get off the subject of slavery, but it all goes hand in hand. Genocide, slavery, it's all the same. So I just don't see the coherence in that.
So I didn't.
Go ahead,
okay. So I didn't really come to this debate wanting to defend this. Well, not wanting to. I would have, if the debate would have been on biblical genocide and on biblical war ethics.
I just wanted to make that point because we're still talking about omnibenevolent. So omnibenevolent covers a great thing, I think.
Right. No,
a God of all love just wouldn't allow certain things. That's the only reason I mentioned that.
No worries. I understand where you're coming from with that. But just to address your point, maybe on radical Islam, I would say to the Muslim what you would say to the Muslim. I don't think your religion is right. I mean, we both have different justifications for it, but that's our end conclusion. Your religion is wrong, and I don't think religion's claims should be thrown out because they could in potential do this any more than empirical claims can. If one reads Aristotle, he said, look, if one observes the world, one just realizes that some men are superior and they have the right to rule over other people. Now, Aristotle, I think, is wrong. I think that empirically speaking, we've come to the point where science has shown that human beings are not born into servitude. They're, rather, we all have different potentials, and race doesn't really capture that as a category.
I agree with
that.
But
just because empiricism can be used to justify immoral things doesn't mean we should ditch it, empiricism any more than religious claims can be used to justify religious behavior or immoral behavior. It shouldn't mean we should throw out, just because of that, religious claims. I think you have to look at the claim on a case-by-case basis. So that's how I would see that. As to as to the other topics you touched on in terms of women, though, actually, I wanted to get on that one. Selling your daughter into slavery. The way I understood those verses was whenever that was done, it was just a way of paying for a dowry. In the Jewish culture, it was custom to for men to pay for a dowry to the other family, and vice versa. But if you had nothing to give to the new husband or to his family, then all that you could give for that time was probably some years of servitude on behalf of your daughter. This is why the slave master or his son, whoever the woman is betrothed to, would take that position. I don't think it's a matter of sex slavery. I think it's a matter of.
Well, I got it. If we go back to that verse, right. It particularly says if you sell your female daughter as a slave, not as a wife. And dowry, the Hebrew term for dowry, which is kaliko, is not even mentioned in that verse. It's nowhere mentioned in that chapter. And understanding biblical exegesis, you have to take, you shouldn't take one isolated verse and try to run with it. And I don't do that. I try my best not to do that. So if you read the whole chapter, you won't see anything about marriage. It's simply about a man basically trying to get money. He can sell his daughter as a slave. And it goes on to, and it used the word ebit, slave. Nothing about wife or concubine. These are different Hebrew terms. So no, it's strictly what it is. It's a sex slave. And then it goes on to say, but if she does not pleases him, and we can go into the etymology of the Hebrew word for pleases. It basically is not about a dowry or anything like that. It would explain that. It doesn't say anything about a dowry, any of that. It's strictly sexual cohabitation. It's satisfying this dude because her father is nothing about marriage or nothing like that. You can go back and check that verse. We can go back and go into the Hebrew itself if you like, but that's not what.
So I do trust your reading of that verse. And my point is, you're right. We shouldn't isolate the text itself from the surrounding scripture, but also, to be fair to the Jewish culture, we shouldn't isolate that verse without reference to why it would have been permitted there. And
yeah, that's true. That's true. Because a lot of the biblical verses, especially in the Tanakh and the Torah, are ambiguous. They are open for a lot of interpretation and hermeneutics to be used. Right. So yeah, I agree with that. But I want to say this before we go to the question and answering. I guess did you still want to do that, Max? Go and ask the people questions.
Yeah.
Or for them to ask questions.
Yeah, I would love that. I just wanted to just mention one thing about the dowry, though, before that happens.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So the way I think about the Jewish Tanakh is, of course, it's very open to interpretation because it's kind of like how one would understand the Constitution or a legal document without any understanding of legal precedents. On the face of it, you're bound to run into a lot of ambiguity. But when you have a greater context of understanding in terms of how judges ruled about it in the past, it does start making a lot more sense. Like, for example, there are laws in the United States where atheists cannot run for elected offices. Yet, if you don't understand that in light of rulings within the Constitution, the First Amendment, you would have no idea that those state laws are really just on the books. They don't actually have any practical application there. Likewise, I think that the permission of that in the legal context is part of the general cultural understanding of the dowry, not necessarily and you understand it solely in the hermeneutics. Yes, I do understand how one can get the idea that it is about sex slavery. That I don't deny. Right. But saying maybe in practice it was different than it was on paper.
Okay, I guess I could go with that sometime.
By the way, I do want to say you've been a great opponent in this. I appreciate the back and forth, and you were not a tough.
You too, man. You too.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So Steve, feel free to let the people in.
Okay, so if you want to join us, please, my voice is going, so please forgive me. I've been talking for most of the day and things. Message me on Facebook, message me on Twitter, message me on G+. I'll give a link to get in. It is obviously invite only because we can't give a link out. You know how it goes. But also you can message CF, you can message Emperor Atheist. If you have questions, you can also ask them from the live feed. But if you want to come in and ask them directly, just message me. I'll get you the link to come in, and you can actually talk about them in real time. Now, we are going to have an after show. I don't think I'll be able to stick around for that, but I will set it up. But it'll be on the GDC Discord. It'll be in the stream channel. And I have, just for now, changed the permissions on the stream channel to anybody can join it rather than invite only. We can change that back as we see fit, but at least get some people in there. But I did a stream last night from the GDC Discord to the Great Debate Community channel. It worked exceptionally well. And so I think we're going to be doing a little more after shows via that platform than Hangouts. So if you want to do an after show on this, and you want to talk about the discussion, because I think there's a lot of stuff to talk about with this, then we'll be doing that afterwards. So, but so far, I really don't have anybody asking any questions. I think we have one question here, and I missed it.
Oh, by the way, I'd like to I have a new subscriber because of this debate, so thank you guys.
And who was that? Who was that person?
His name is Lucas Honduras.
Well, I thought you meant me. I was your second subscriber.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna subscribe too. I don't know the link. I'll subscribe to your link too.
Forever and Eternity, the Catholic Fusionist. I was a second subscriber. Okay, PZ Myers has a question. If we can't ignore the text in favor of interpretation, then why not throw out the Bible altogether?
Wait, is that the actual PZ Myers?
Well, how many PZs do we know? How many do we want around? Is it one PZ enough?
I mean, yes.
I love PZ Myers, but I mean, one, even he'll probably tell you one is more than enough. You know?
So what was this question?
I'll ask it again. Again, I'm sure that he's talking in reference to the slavery thing, because the slavery's in there.
Right.
If we can ignore the text in favor of interpretation, then why not throw out the Bible altogether?
Well, I never said we could ignore the text in favor of interpretation. At least I don't think I did. I think my point was I think my main point was biblical slavery was only approved for the Jewish Old Covenant, and that itself was only approved because of their hardness of heart, not necessarily because there's something in the state of nature that says one man can own another man. And furthermore, I don't think I really ignored it in favor of interpretation. I think I just wanted to read it in light of how the Jews understood it, in light of cultural anthropology. I think that adds greater understanding to the textual interpretation. I don't think it detracts from it or ignores it. It would be like saying, why study the law? Why not just throw out the law books and just have judges pass decisions? Well, they still have to cite it for the sake of precedence, as well as a bunch of other background information as well. So I think that would be my answer there.
Okay, do you want to answer that too? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask both of you. I mean, obviously you're going to have a different perspective than CF, but do you want to address it from your perspective of why the Bible, if we're allowed to take interpretations from it, especially if you think a lot of it is allegorical and metaphorical, then why if some people do take it literally, why should they just throw it out altogether? You're muted, EA. Did you think? Oh, that question was to you. I'm asking the same question to you that was asked to CF. Do you think that if people should look at the Bible metaphorically in some places or allegorical, that if that's the case, and it should be more by interpretation of what is factual and what is not, then why not throw it out the entire Bible altogether?
Well, yeah, that's a proposition I take against the Bible too, because me holding a degree in biblical theology, and we were taught to take the Bible literal. Okay, going through the evangelical seminary that I went through, we were taught to take the Bible literal. If we're going to believe the foundation of Christianity, anyway, I'm just talking about Christianity. If we're going to believe in the literal resurrection of Jesus Christ, and most people believe in the literal resurrection of Lazarus or Jairus' daughter, or people, the dead men touching dead men touching the bones of Elisha and resurrecting. I mean, what are the parameters? What are parameters? And no one can answer these questions. There has to be a set of parameters to where you can know what is metaphorical, symbolic, and what is not. But there are no parameters that's ever been set up in Christology, in theology. So yes, when you, like for example, Noah's flood. There are some Christians who say, no, we don't think that was particularly literal. But yes, Jesus, that was literal. That was literal. Or we don't take Daniel's writings as far as lion den stories and Noah, I'm not Noah, but Jonah being in a well for 3 days and 3 nights. We don't take that literal. So there are certain schools of Christianity that says, well, we don't think that was literal, but we think this is literal. So yeah, it's contradictory. And you know, if you're going to take something literal, then take it all literal. Take it all literal. Don't just say, because, and like I said, I think that goes back to Christians and apologists trying to soften the things that they know don't sound right, things that they know are just incoherent, things that are basically just downright silly. So yeah, of course, me being a strong atheist, yeah, I say throw it all out, of course.
By the way, I'm not sure, when you went to seminary, was it an evangelical fundamentalist kind of seminary?
Yeah, it was.
When
I fell up under the Wesley camp, John Wesley and his brother.
Oh, I see. So out of curiosity, when they said take everything literally, did that include the part where they asked, where Jesus said, "This is my body and this is my blood," or was that more figurative?
We knew that. Well, like I say, some things in the New Testament, when you do New Testament textual criticism, you know certain things are a metaphor because Jesus said it. Certain things that Jesus said, this is an analogy when he was talking to his disciples. You know what I mean? This is an analogy of this. So certain things Jesus would explain clear. It wouldn't be ambiguity. You know, he would explain to the disciples, like the story. Well, a lot of different stories that Jesus particularly told his disciples. A lot of different similes, as we call them. We would take those things to be what Jesus said. As far as the literalism of the resurrection, we took that to be real. We actually, in Matthew 27, when it says that a whole bunch of people bust up out the graves and went into the city to witness to the people, we took that to be real. Him casting spirits into pigs. We took all that literal. As far as the New Testament is concerned, we took everything in the New Testament to be literal. Yeah.
I'm actually kind of surprised that you agreed with John Wesley and his brother over things, because I actually, as a way of preparing for this debate, for one of the rejoinders about how Southern slave owners used the Bible to justify slavery, I actually cited one of John Wesley's anti-slavery tracts to show that there are also some Christians who are abolitionists. So so you might still be an atheist, but I think there's a bit of Methodism that still is within you, probably.
No way.
No, because you're taking the anti-slavery side. That's the joke.
Oh yeah, okay. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Any other questions?
I guess that's all the questions.
Yeah, there's really not a lot. Question that one person has asked, though: how do you determine what is metaphorical and what is not?
Right.
I mean, I don't think that there is any. Yeah, I don't really think that there's any hard and fast rules. It's kind of like porn. You know it when you see it. I'm actually quoting an American member of the Supreme Court who was asked, okay, what's the difference between, like erotic art and pornography? And he's like, yeah, I don't really know of a clear definition, but you know it when you see it. It's kind of like that. And like, usually you have to just pick apart. Usually if there's any ambiguity, you just have to pick apart what it's more likely trying to express, given the kind of book it is, the kind of literary style it's trying to present, what the author and and how well it matches other scripture. So I believe that would probably be your best bet. There is really no hard and fast rule to it.
All right, do you want to like expound upon that a little bit?
It's me or
no? Go
ahead. Yeah, it's okay. It's, imagine if you were to line up people. On one side, there's a guy who's completely clean shaven, like myself, and on the other hand, you have people with big bushy beards, and you have a whole gradient of people who just have a little more stubble. I don't think anyone can walk on that line and say, okay, this is where the facial hair stops and the beard begins. I think that it's kind of equivalent to that. When it comes to the distinction between literal stuff and metaphors, like there are clear examples of metaphors, like when Jesus says, "I am the door." Like that is clearly Jesus saying, "Okay, I'm analogous to a door. I'm something. I'm not literally a door." But on the other hand, you have things where you understand it as being pretty literal, like when Jesus eats something. Like I don't think that's a metaphor. But there's stuff in the middle that even Christians debate amongst themselves, like whether or not the Eucharist is the body and blood of Christ, or if that's just a metaphor. Catholics think it's literal. A lot of Protestants do not, or and things of the like. Some.
Now, is that a salvational issue? The Eucharist? Or is that
I'd say. Is that a salvational issue? In terms of the distinction between being heretical and not being heretical, I would say it is, but that's me coming from a Catholic perspective.
Sure. I mean, that would not be orthodoxy, right? If you didn't believe that, would it be heterodox? Right. Okay. So I think real quick, let's give EA a time to answer that. The same kind of question though on the metaphorical thing. I mean, your position, I assume, is that it's difficult to determine which stories in there are metaphorical and which ones are to be taken literally.
Is that a question to me, Steve?
Sure. Yes, sir. Did you hear me?
Was that a question to me?
It was, yes.
Oh yeah. That's like I said. Like I answered before. That there's no parameters. There's no way to decide what is metaphorical and what isn't. I mean, for example, Jesus turning water into wine. Just a lot of the miracles. Jesus walking on water. I mean, come on, man. These things goes against the laws of physics. But of course, if God gave him power to do it, he was Jesus. Of course, then he can do it because he's basically Jesus. But I mean, rationally speaking, reasonably speaking, we don't see these things. We don't see the law of we don't see a natural law ever being cheated like that. So what do you think? I mean, what were these things actual things that actually happened? Of course, I don't believe so. But in the Bible, it happened. Everything happened in the Bible, and people believe it. But I mean, but as far as the answer to the question directly, no, there's no way to tell what you just either going to. It's just a matter of faith. You're either going to believe it happened literally, or you're not. Because even when you think about a lot of Christians who disagree on what is metaphorical and what is not, you have a lot of different sects of Christians who agree, who have different spins on different stories and verses in the Bible. Oh no, I don't think that was literal. So I mean, you can talk to different Christian sects and schools of thought on that all day. But one thing they do believe that a man resurrected from the dead, which is also goes against the laws of physics and what we know as far as cells dying. So I mean, that's the biggest thing I think that it basically don't matter what you believe in. You believe that a man rose from the dead and died for your sins. And so yeah, that's my take on that. But this is another thing I want to say, Steve,
sure.
Concerning me, as far as on the slavery issue. And I think this is a strange thing. I brought this up in a debate about 2-3 years ago. I think it's strange that Jesus never been, I mean, slavery was widespread throughout the Roman Empire. And then I'm gonna end right here. It was widespread throughout the Roman world, but Jesus never spoke against slavery. As a matter of fact, we have verses in the gospel, Luke chapter 12, if I'm not mistaken, where Jesus actually says that it's okay to beat a slave if he did something wrong and understood what was going on. But it's also okay to beat a slave if he didn't know, but you just beat him lightly. I think that's ridiculous. But this is Jesus actually speaking pro-slavery verses in Luke 12, but he never spoke against it. I mean, so I think that's a testament to the immorality of the Bible and people just believing it this day and time just because they were indoctrinated with it as babies, just like basically most of all of us was. Right. And they just defended it. They have to defend it. They have to defend it.
All right, thank you, Ray. Let's do a 5-minute wrap up, and then, like I said, we'll start the after show. If you guys can make it, that's fine. And if not, of course, you're not obligated to.
Yeah, I think I got to make a run. I'm gonna try to make it for a little while.
All right, how about you, CF?
Yeah, I'll be in the after show. Why not?
Of course
But
you will. Yeah.
but
Yeah, but
oh, actually, go ahead. Wrap up.
oh yeah, going to wrap up. So take 5 minutes to do your final. You went first, so you go now, and then Imperatheus will give us the last 5 minutes and take us out.
Okay. Well,
5 minutes.
well, no matter what side you fell up on, I think this was a great debate. Hence the community name. But in any case, Emperor Atheist, thank you for not making this easy on me. I wouldn't have it any other way. Steve, thanks again for hosting. Thank you to all my friends, Jim, Shadow, Frank, all of you guys for helping me out with my slavery points. As we had seen, so as we started off there, so the first thing to say is Christians are not committed to the defense of any other kind of slavery. The slavery of the Jewish Old Covenant we can understand as a hardness of heart that was permitted, in much the same way divorce was permitted, going on the same logic that Jesus himself used. Like divorce, there was also no slavery in the beginning when God made everything. And it was only because but we could say it was permitted for the same reason, because of the Jewish heart, the hardness of heart of the Jews. Like any other people who existed at the time, slavery was considered to be the norm. It was not something people questioned. Imagine, as people who have lived with democracy, I'd like to make an analogy. If you were to say to someone 1,000 years ago, imagine if we elected our leaders, and if you lost an election, the leader, the person who has all the power, would just peacefully hand over that power to somebody else. Naturally, people back then would have laughed at you. Likewise, because because feudalism was the norm. Likewise, but now we have thriving democracies all over the world. So it is possible, despite complications in theory. Likewise, when it comes to the issue of slavery, although it was considered to be such the norm as to be expected, we have now abolished it because one of the truths of Christianity has become so ingrained in our society that that even those of us who are not religious agree. Although for secular humanist reasons, the conclusion is still there. Namely, all humans have an equal dignity and worth to one another in their humanity. And when it comes to biblical slavery, although it was a rough era where the ancient Jews lived, their laws can be understood within. Steve, is my time up? I'll take that as a no.
No, you got about 2.5 more minutes.
Oh, okay. Although their times were harsh, the institution of slavery that God allowed them still at least let them handle a few things. One, allowed them to handle prisoners of both war and those who lived among them. Two, it allowed for women to pay off their dowry, at least according to Jewish tradition. Three, it allowed a way to facilitate debt and make sure that one person wasn't so indebted over another, or poverty didn't strike them, at least too harshly. And what's more is slavery in the context of the New Covenant calls for us to do something even greater, which is to treat one another as equals. Remember, when Onesimus was sent back to Philemon, Paul asked him to treat him as he would Paul himself, a free man. Although what it might say on paper is one thing, the spirit of the law commands us to do something even greater, which is to love one another as equals, because we are all created in the image of God. Although nature itself might not make us equals, we are still equals with respect to a greater love, the fact that we are all made in the image of God. Now, I understand, and I also want to say that I understand the trepidation that people might have with verses of slavery, especially my fellow Christians, and I know atheists have a hard time with it, and I can understand why they would turn it and see to it as immoral. But on the other hand, I at least want to show that there is a fighting defense for the biblical texts, for God, and for the reason why slavery might be instituted. And with that, I just hope that this has been a very encouraging debate for everyone else, and that you've at least gotten some entertainment, if not knowledge, out of it. Thank you.
Was that it? Oh, you done, Matt?
Yeah,
I'm done.
Yeah. So EA, why don't you take 5 minutes? And by the way, thank you CF for that. By the way, all these little acronyms are out there. I got to keep track of these little two-letter acronyms. I'm glad nobody calls me S&M. You know, actually, that'd be kind of good if they did. Actually,
yeah.
Go for it. EA. All right, you got 5 minutes. Same time. Go.
All right. Oh, well, I probably won't take up the whole 5 minutes, but yeah, I just want to say thanks to the former Max Hangout, now called the Catholic Fusionist. Subscribe to his channel too.
Oh, doxed him. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. He's a great guy. Thanks for the debate. And I think this was a good topic. Some people might claim it to be a boring topic, but I don't think so. I think it's a great topic. Yeah, and thanks to you too, Steve, for moderating and doing it. Your channel is growing bigger, and that's great. That's a good thing for the great debate community. But I just want to say this. I just touching on the omnibenevolence of God. This is a problem I have with basically the attributes, because I guess just going into and going over the verses that me and CF actually went over. I think people are probably going to keep debating this for a long time, but hopefully my points were clear, and I made my points very clear. But just contrasting omnibenevolence with omniscience, and just going into just thinking about it philosophically. And when we talk about, as I mentioned in the beginning of our debate, and I really didn't really touch on it too well, the problem of evil and suffering. Think about this for a minute. If God has a plan for the universe, right, which is implemented as a part of his will, then why does he not simply create? And this is just a question I asked, not to you particularly, CL, just an open question. Why does he simply not create a deterministic universe in which the goal, at least of that plan, is inevitable, or better still, created with a plan achieved? And I think omniscience contradicts omnibenevolence. And I think it contradicts omnipotence, because if God is free to prevent evil, and I think slavery is evil, and I think we can agree with that. And like I said, even indentured servitude, we don't even have the full concept if that was even moral or not. But if a God is free to prevent evil, if he's omnipotent, then why does he fail to do so? If the evil in the world is the intention of the deity, then he is not benevolent. Because if he's omniscient, then he knows what is going on in the world. And hopefully I got enough time to just make a point. Just think about kids, and this is coming off the topic of slavery in particular. But I think all of us agree that slavery is counterproductive to civilization. But just think about kids that were born with Down syndrome for hundreds and hundreds of years before we could figure this thing out. Basically, recently, we're just now figuring out Down syndrome. Intestinal blockages, children dying from just one disease I want to name. You have an omnibenevolent God, man, that is omniscient, that is omnipotent, that is sitting here watching all of this for hundreds of years, watching all of these kids die, been intestinal blockages and suffering, and just letting this go on. I just can't see how we can view any deity of the Bible or Quran, or any of these particular Judeo-Christian Islamic faiths as omnibenevolent. I just don't believe it. It's kind of hard for me to even accept that the God of the Bible, that the God of the Quran and these particular books are even benevolent. So I just want to say, but thanks for the debate. I just think we should continue to question these particular attributes of this deity. And I think we should continue to question the validity of these books, whether we agree or not. I think even as a believer, we should continue to question these beliefs and not just, just given to God did it syndrome. Thanks again for everybody for watching.
Thanks, EA. And I want to thank you, both of you guys. These are not easy things to put together as far as debating. I know both of you guys spent a lot of time on your presentations. You had to talk to a lot of people in order to get enough information to put forth a very good presentation. So I want to thank you guys for putting the time in for that. I want to let everybody know we do have some more debates coming up, quite a few actually. The next one is Duranism. Those of you might know him as the Flat Earther on YouTube. I think he's like the biggest channel on YouTube. He'll be debating surveying techniques with a guy named Jesse Kolowski. That'll be on this channel here. I am going to set up a stream from the Discord channel immediately after this. It takes about 10 minutes. If you want to be a part of that, then you need to go to the Discord, go to the stream channel, and you could actually be a part of that discussion. If not, you can listen in. That'll actually be on the Great Debate Community channel. So if you're not subscribed to the Great Debate Community channel yet, that is the other channel that everybody can kind of put their own stuff on and run as they see fit. That link is in the video description. The link to join the Great Debate Community, which, as you said, EA, is growing, and I expect it to be growing exponentially with all these new people that we're reaching out to, new communities. We just talked to a community today that had 97,000 members. They watched that last debate we had with Flat Earth that had like over 100 views on a channel that was brand new. That would be the Non Sequitur Show channel. So if you haven't subscribed to that, that will also be in the video description. And of course, the link to the Discord, the 24-hour live discussions, will also be in the video description as well. So once again, I want to thank you guys. It was a very spirited debate. It shows what happens when you have two intelligent people talking about a topic they do not agree upon, but they can actually have intellectual discourse. And I think that's the direction that I want debates to go. I mean, no, there's a whole fan base for shit shows, and God knows I'm one of them. I'm not going to say that I don't enjoy a good shit show, especially dealing with flat earthers, but I find that these types are a little bit easier to moderate and wrangle in, and not have to get to the point where people are just throwing invectives and pejoratives and things out there. And so I want to thank you guys for showing people how a good debate should be done. Okay. With that, guys, we'll see you over on the after show, which again will be on the Great Debate Community channel. Link is in the video description. Thank you.